Successful Management Styles of India, Volume 1, What is Different? Author Rajsekar Polapagada. In the audiobook series, we are going to cover Chapter 5. This is under Part 2. Part 2, Indian Management Styles prior to economic reforms in 1991. Quote, India is the cradle of human race, the birthplace of human speech, the mother of history, the grandmother of legend, and the great-grandmother of tradition. Our most valuable and most constructive materials in the history of man are treasured up in India only. Unquote. Mark Twain. Chapter 5. Transforming an American company to Indian style. Quote, every reform movement has a lunatic fringe. Unquote. Theodore Roosevelt. Summer is usually very hot in Western India, where our project site was located, but mornings are pleasant. During one summer Sunday morning, while we were having our breakfast, Gordon remembered the great Indian leaders. He wondered how present Indian leaders compared to the legends of the past. I told Gordon, given the complexity of India, it is very difficult for any single leader to be acceptable pan-India. However, that doesn't mean that pan-Indian leaders have not emerged. In fact, India itself is not a country, but a continent. I thought it was difficult to explain to Gordon the complexity of India with 28 states, 200 languages, and 20 odd scripts, where almost all the world's major religions are present and active, while they are respected. Additionally, India being world's largest democracy with free press, every person has a different view on every issue, and also many are not just vocal but sometimes violent in expression, called dharnas and bandhs, means forced closing of shops and schools. This is to express their viewpoint, irrespective of public opinion. Some private leaders take over the city or the part of the town for few days. Leave alone bringing them on single line of thinking. Even understanding India is equal to understanding the world. To make it simple, I thought it is better to share my own experience prior to 1991 and let Gordon deduct his own calculations or conclusions. It also might give a glimpse of Indian scenario prior to economic reforms. This was my story starting after my graduation in chemical engineering. I joined an American oil company which was nationalized later. The decade I stayed in that company till I left also covers the period 1980 to 1991 when several policy changes were taken by Indian government. I told Gordon, what you see today is a lot different from what I saw when I left India in 1991. In fact, in 1991, there was an economic crisis which pushed India into taking economic reforms which were pioneered by the late Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. I explained to Gordon how an American oil company I worked was slowly changed and brought to Indian style of working. Gordon was curious to know how an American oil company was Indianized. Nationalization of Indian oil industry. To explain my story, I had to go a little bit into the history of oil industry in India. Between 1950 and 60, during the regime of Prime Minister Nehru, foreign oil companies, Parma Shell, Caltex and Esso were invited to establish their operations in India. Subsequently, between 1970 and 80, Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi, who led a socialistic thinking to help the poor, has coined a word called Garibi Hatavo, which means let us eradicate poverty. She took up two major actions. One was nationalization of banking sector and other was nationalization of foreign oil companies in a short span of time. I worked in one of the oil companies whose name is kept confidential for the sake of my liberty of expression. However, readers may not find it very difficult to know the names of the companies. The incidents are real and give a glimpse of change in management style. It is interesting to see some following old management techniques while others adopt to time-tested Indian values and compassion and patience. Few following old discipline, others trying to implement public sector policies inspired by socialistic pattern of society in not only India but elsewhere in the world, such as erstwhile Soviet Union. One refinery was located in a city of Eastern India, while another was located in Western India. Both were American oil companies. When the nationalization took over, they have amalgamated both the companies into one. While in Bombay we had different canteen for staff and the officers, the Eastern Indian town had only single canteen. While at one place indianization was quick, at another location it was slow. At one location staff were dedicated and had loyalty to the workplace, while in another location employees were result oriented and disciplined. I am not trying to compare two places, but the geographic location as well as the old companies had left a legacy for both the companies. In one location, workers used to go on for frequent strikes and officers worked with team spirit. In other location, work was smooth while many employees were looking for greener pastures and leaving at regular intervals. While both places belong to one company, their management struggled to implement discipline at one place. At other place, retention of qualified engineers was the problem. My idea was not to cover all the aspects of management, but the area of human resource, such as recruiting, retaining talent, leadership, including transparency, following rule book, empowerment, and succession, which are the main tenets of this book. A little to my personal side, Gordon was curious to know my first hand account. I was also enthusiastic to explain it was my dream job and to relive my graduation days and lessons I learned. Like all youngsters, I had a dream to get into a decent job. Decent job was defined as a posting with a four-figure salary. There are not many companies in India at that time who gave four-figure salaries to a fresh engineering graduate. We had a petroleum refinery and a fertilizer company in the town where I studied my engineering. I knew if I stood among the first few in my batch, I could get a summer training in the American refining company. Best part of the job in an American oil company was, in those days, lifestyle, facilities, a nice club, beachside camping, restaurant with ice creams and coke and subsidized rides. Anyone would love to work there. Who doesn't want to go to that refinery for training, which had a restaurant like a five-star hotel? At Seaside Club, just across the university campus, a different world with a club, tennis, swimming pool, air-conditioned bungalows. Life is a luxury jaunt if we join the American Oil Company. We used to spend our weekends with some of our friends whose parents worked there. Merit or recommendation for recruitment. As you know, that when everybody was eyeing for a job in the American Oil Company, very few would get it, and that included merit as well as recommendation. So we had 4 friends. 2 of them entered through merit and the other 2 through recommendation. After I completed my MTech with petroleum refining as specialization, I got an interview call from that American Oil Company and was offered a job there. I negotiated for some increments as I did my post-graduation, which was denied by the director technical then, that I need to justify my merit by my performance, not by the additional qualification. That was the American style of pushing people to perform. To cut the long story short, I soon joined in the Bombay office in the National Petroleum Corporation. Of course, the name changed. The few Indian companies could boast of a residential colony with bungalow, swimming pool, clubhouse, tennis courts for officers. Once I got my dream job, I realized that the American company is no more an American company. It is being nationalized, and there are some of the socialistic pattern is introduced. That shouldn't affect my career prospects, I thought. As my dream came true, things were not all that cozy at recruitment level. One of my schoolmates who did his master's in science was taken in the same company as an operator. Then there was another government policy to recruit graduates from special categories whose merit was not the main criteria. Subsequently, I hoped in the promotions the merit policy would be applied. Even there, I was disappointed. As employment was tough those days, merit continued to be a criteria on paper while recommendations continued through backdoor. Thus, there was a gradual deterioration started in recruitment due to reservations and recommendations. Three management styles. Management style is situational. It varies with men, materials, and resources. It may not be prudent to compare different styles of management, or some say what works is management. As the maxim goes, proof of pudding lies in eating. During my stay in Indian Oil Company, I came across three senior executives. The names changed to keep their privacy: George, Nariman, and Prasad. First two represented American management style, while the last one came from public sector. All three had different styles and in general worked well, except that none of them could stop the attrition of qualified manpower and limited growth of the company due to restricted resources from the government. Leaders are admired for their problem-solving ability more than any other qualification. Successful managers in India rank high in retaining talent, as till recently many corporations had very limited resources. Let us see how three leaders handled the oil company while it was slowly Indianized. Firefighter from the front. George was a hard-working science graduate, worked his way to top during American management. He studied all the design manuals and was able to discuss in detail the technical details, while he was very comfortable in the operation front, working shoulder to shoulder with the operators. His ingenuity resulted in a lot of saving for refinery. One example, while other rival oil companies were spending rupees 400 crores for a similar project, he led a team to complete 2 million tons crude refining project in rupees 80 crores, which is equivalent to 50 million US dollars, which is almost a fraction of the budget which competitors spent. The government of India, which was in socialistic pattern, had a peculiar way of rewarding oil companies by giving 12% return on investment. Thus, those oil companies who spent 200% extra cost on the project were rewarded wrongly by giving 12% returns, while those who spent less on the project cost were given less reward, as the 12% calculation is done on the capital of the project, irrespective of the efficiency and ability of the project people. George used to be the first person reporting to duty and last person to leave the office daily. When there was a big tank fire, in spite of being a director, George fought the fire from the front. He was a role model for many and yet was denied chairman post as he arrived late for the CEO interview. There is a rumor that promotion in public sectors are fixed based on their proximity to the power, and many believe that George lost not because of his merit, but he lost through lack of recommendation. This is an example how succession is planned And in the recruitment of chief executives, IAS, who didn't have any experience in the industry, were playing a major role. Thus, oil company, which is supposed to be innovative, has become bureaucratic. The perfect leader, Nariman, was a Parsi, an ethnic group from Iran, who took refuge in India after Islamic invasion. Many Parsis who were in the prominent positions in India due to their hard work, honesty, and high education. Nariman was known for his self-confidence and self-respect and empowering his staff. He was a good executioner and was a role model for many youngsters like me at the time. He also rose from the ranks and used to be different from George in some respects. While Nariman was comfortable in delegating the work, George was uncomfortable and wanted to have 100% control on the day-to-day affairs. Nariman never stayed after 4 p.m. in the office and believed in empowerment, while George was a late sitter in the office and a perfect backseat driver. Nariman's instructions were typical of 100% empowerment. He used to say, "Call me only if the refinery is on fire." Under him, staff felt the responsibility, while George was a typical Indian benevolent leader. Nariman was molded in American style, and he was known for his punctuality, which is legendary. Not surprisingly, many used to admire Nariman, and he followed American style of management. The conflict between George, who was director, and Nariman, who was general manager, was interesting to watch. But both worked in tandem, and refinery and oil company were its best till the third person, Prasad, took over. Horses may run away. Mr. Jitendra Prasad, the name changed, was our general manager who joined our oil company, hired from a public sector company. Prasad was a sincere, hardworking, and obedient. He also was promoted to general manager from the ranks. One day he went to Delhi to interview bright engineers for our company. I received a fax from him asking me to send a list of questions to Delhi. I promptly sent the questions. Immediately I received a written fax. Where are the answers? So I sent the answers. So after returning from Delhi, Mr. Prasad triumphantly declared, "I interviewed many young, bright engineers, but I selected some above average but enthusiastic engineers." I was little surprised and asked him why not bright engineers. He continued nonchalantly, "If we hire horses, they may run away, but donkeys will stay." Hearing this, I decided not to stay longer in the company, and I thought I am a thoroughbred horse. Public sector, due to their recruiting policy with reservations and recommendations, slowly reduced to mediocrity than meritocracy. While in promotion, also, the seniority was slowly taken as a bigger weightage than the merit. Prasad had management style which did not infuse confidence in his staff, nor he delegated the work. He was a perfect example of micromanagement and always used to say, "It's like having snake in the bed to have the hydrogen plant in the refinery," which did not infuse confidence in the youngsters. He wanted to know hourly health of the plant, which did not develop the staff. However, he was best rated by his bosses as he followed their instruction and implemented them meticulously, which of course resulted in good performance. As a result, development of leadership suffered, and what followed Prasad was mediocre management and yes men to headquarters. It was a typical backseat driving from central government, which took away the freedom of the public sector undertakings. Succession plan. Federal government had a bureaucratic approach to factories, which is one of the biggest drawbacks of economic progress of India prior to economic reforms. Fortunately, some public sectors like nuclear and space organizations, where merit alone was consideration, did not suffer as much as oil companies and banks. Human resource was the first casualty in indianization, and transparency has become first disappeared in the American management style, which made the Indian companies bureaucratic. Appointment of CEO by Ministry of Petroleum has only added to problems than solved them. Soon, an American oil company is branded nationalized. Transparency and talent recognition were the first casualty. With the recruitment of mediocre talent and introducing PSU norms, trouble started in American Oil Company. There used to be a signboard behind me when I first joined the American company. We will take up the impossible task today and leave miracles for tomorrow. Leave the miracles, but the spirit was high, and the motto of the American Oil Company. Officers took pride in their work. Everybody talked about new ideas, and there used to be a lot of enthusiasm in the workplace. Nationalization has seriously affected two most conspicuous qualities of the American Oil Company. One was employees were earlier free and open to come up with their ideas, suggestions, and feedback to management. After nationalization, new ideas were not encouraged, and lack of fairness and transparency marked PSU's working style. It is not uncommon to see PSUs trying new technologies nor generate patents. Here is a classic example how an idea to use new technology was not encouraged from the newly nationalized oil company. While India produced best engineers from IITs, most of them did not stay in India, and majority went for further studies in USA and settled there for better salaries and better recognition. Thus, soon same thing followed in our company, where many of the technical talent had to resign and go for tenure passes. Fixing people instead of problem. Another example of lack of transparency was not fixing the problem, but fixing people. In a new project where an engineering error occurred while 15 millimeters wear height was erroneously taken as 51 millimeters, that increased the solvent ratio by 80%, and it increased the cost a lot. After shutdown, it was found that the mistake, the management, instead of owning up the error, tried to hush up and promoted the manager who did the mistake. This lack of transparency and fairness is blatant and typical bureaucratic way. Nobody raised the voice against it. I understood one of my senior bosses had to pay the price for it. Some would argue that this kind of pushing the problems under the carpet may happen anywhere, but public sectors are more prone for these activities, and that is one of the reasons for brain drain and exodus. Brain drain and exodus. If resignations are any indication for discontent in the company, attrition was 20% in our technical department in the nationalized company where I worked, which was very high by any standards. Some middle management officers got offers from oil companies in Singapore and Middle East, and exodus never stopped. Added to it, senior management started giving excuses that if people wanted to leave, the gates are open, which gives a feeling that they don't care for the brain drain. Many youngsters bought this logic, and though experience and skill were the biggest loss, as nobody cared, as the remaining thought that they would get better chance of promotion. It is the fate of many public sector undertakings, with few exceptions. If employees are not taken care by the corporation, the rivals will sure take care of them, and that's why the loss of many efficient public sector undertakings was the gain of foreign oil companies. Following the rule book, most of the public sector units, like the present Indian Petroleum Corporation, followed rules broadly as laid down by environment safety, if not on succession and empowerment. What was missing is the risk-taking capacity of entrepreneurs. In Indian public sector, or for the matter in scams, it is the small fish which caught not the big fish. I recall one incident where one officer was caught using wrong travel claim, quoting somebody else's railway ticket. He claimed reimbursement on first class ticket expense, which he did not travel. As his bad luck would have it, a bishop in the church, who originally travelled on the ticket, gave his witness against Mr. Muhammad, name changed, as he was a leader in officer association. It is rumoured that management victimized him. So, later a bigger scandal came to light involving oil pilferage on a daily shipment of tank trucks, where some of the innocent people were victimized. As it is difficult to prove, the case was closed, limiting the damage to few officers who admitted the crime. Thus, following the rule book is limited to few lower level staff, and the big fish always escaped, which is keeps a big question mark under the integrity of the management. Future oil companies and lessons learned. Gordon was a little disappointed with my story. It seemed he must have preferred to have a summary of differences between American and Indian management styles, including cultural differences. But what he got the story was a typical, uninteresting story of. So I explained to Gordon, nationalization per se is not the wrong thing, but the way it is implemented and which resulted in the failure of the companies is what one should consider. In fact, the collapse of Soviet Union economy is a lesson for the socialistic pattern of thought that one has to look at the efficiency, ability, and marketability and financial success as a criteria for public sector. So, though security and energy were the main criteria for India 30 years back, so they nationalized the oil industry. Later on, they have realized their mistake, and today there are 3-4 major players in private industry who are partnering with government or on their own, they have their own refinery. So, Gordon and me being part of that private industry, the oil industry, after 3 decades, know that Indian government has taken a corrective action. So thus my experience in an oil company which was originally American, was nationalized later, ended. Still, Gordon was puzzled to know the Indian management style. So the chapter 5 is concluded now. In the chapter 6, we will discuss about survival strategies of license and permit Raj. Signing off, Rajsekhar Polaperda.